Hi, welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. And as you can see, I'm not on a wine estate. I'm not in a fine restaurant or a luxury hotel, none of my usual locations. Instead, I'm on the golf course, and that's for a couple of very good reasons. First of all, tail end of winter, and this is golf in Johannesburg. There are a few better places on the planet to play golf in winter than here in Johannesburg, and this, the Rurik Global Country Club at Rand Park, is a good example. But there's also a lot of golf and wine coming into play with Dan Really Likes Wine over the next few weeks. I'm going to be in Scotland next week, and in fact, you're going to be able to see the show with Bear Robertson from Anthony Rupert Wines and a couple of guest wines as we take South African wine to Scotland and revel in just how well it is received. So that is coming up, and there's also coming up some time spent with one of my favourite chefs, Ransley Peterson, at the Old Oak at Royal Johannesburg, where he takes some wines that I'm giving him and getting back from him what he thinks the ideal menus are to go with his food. It's a great point of departure. Don't start with the food and try and find some wine to match. Start with the wine and see what dish that inspires, and Ransley will be suitably inspired. And somebody else who's inspired by wine and food is our first guest on the show today. I went down to Durban recently to hang out at a restaurant I hadn't been to before, but had been wanting to go to for some time. How does a little restaurant nobody really knew that much about outside of Durban itself become South Africa's #1 restaurant? Well, that is what the living room at Summerhill Estate did a couple of years ago at the Eat Out Food and Restaurant Awards, and its #1 status suddenly got it this army of followers. A big part of it, though, along with the food, is the wine, and the sommelier, an Austrian who learned her trade in Germany, now calls home at Durban with her husband and puts together an exceptional wine list fueled by a real passion for what she does. Head back to the end of 2022 and you might recall the earthquake that struck the culinary world that is South Africa. We know when there are restaurant awards at the end of the year, 11 of the top 10 restaurants will be in either the Winelands or Bree Street, and that is how the restaurant scene works in South Africa, except it didn't in 2022 because the restaurant of the year at the Eat Out Woolworths Awards that year was a little spot up in KwaZulu-Natal that not everybody had heard of, at least hadn't then. Now they certainly have, because it's become the site of many a great food pilgrimage and wine pilgrimage, because as good as the food is, it's the wine that is every bit its equal. And that's why I have touched down to meet the all-star couple who have produced the living room at Summerhill Estate, and I am going to be dining a little later on this evening with the chef half of the partnership, but it is the sommelier half that I'm genuinely excited about because, Johanna, of all the people I've met in the South African wine industry, I'm not sure I've met anyone who gets quite so excited about wines nobody else has ever heard of, wines made of grapes that nobody's even discovered yet, and wines that are just full of excitement and interest in something different. And that really seems to be at the heart of your philosophy as a sommelier.
So, yeah, absolutely. Because especially if you look at the kind of food that we produce, there's so much love and passion and effort that goes into every little detail. So we just want to make sure that also what we're serving in the glass has at least that much love, passion, and work and dedication behind it.
Those people who don't know you will have picked up on an accent that doesn't quite sound Durban-like. Before we find out how you got to be in Durban, let's go back to the start of your wine journey, because it wasn't in South Africa. How and where did you fall in love with wine?
So I'm in the hospitality industry since I'm 15, and then it was just a natural progress that wine crossed just when I was 21 years old. I haven't drunk any wine before.
Of course you haven't.
Of course not, I'm Austrian. And yeah, so wine got much more a center point of my work, of my passion, and that's where it all started.
I've spent a little bit of time in Austria. Most of my recollections are through the rather foggy lens of Jägermeister at après-ski. The wine knowledge that most South Africans will have of Austria is, I suspect, fairly limited. What is the Austrian wine landscape, the wine culture like? Is wine a big part of everyday life?
It's a very proud nation, so they of course make sure you drink Austrian wine from the beginning. So Austrian wine has always been, or growing up, having wine was always a big part of the culture, from education point of view, from going out point, so wine was always a big part of it.
So you've got a country that drinks, enjoys, revels in wine, probably more than we'd expected to from a South African vantage. It wasn't Austria, though, where the real wine education kicked in. Tell us about starting to discover wine beyond just, oh, this is quite nice as a glass, and this might be something I want to do.
Yeah, so right after the hotel school, I went to Germany. That's where I then started in Hamburg, and then I went to Spain, then I went back to Berlin, and that's with traveling around, with working in different countries, with working in different restaurants. Wine was always a big part of it, and also learning by doing, because not just learning by the books, but also really learning by experiencing, learning, working with different sommeliers who just give so much knowledge or share so much knowledge, just made it so much easier to fall in love with the wines.
Again, for a lot of people in our part of the world, here in South Africa, German wine starts and ends with Riesling, but there is an awful lot more to German wine than just one varietal.
There is, but actually especially the restaurant where Johannes and me met, so it's Weinbar Rotz, they had more than 800 positions on the wine list and 400 of them were Riesling. So, so Riesling was a huge focus and huge center of my first wine education, and just how to get to know the wines, but also how diverse Riesling can be, and also all the other varieties, but Riesling definitely being a good part of the German wine scene.
It's Riesling very much the star, just as you and Johannes are the stars of the South African culinary scene now. He's kind of South African, kind of German, bit of both, but you met in Germany. What did you meet first, a South African chef or a South African wine, and which did you fall in love with faster?
First, I met South African wine, actually. So 2009, when I went to Hamburg, Beaumont's Hope Marguerite was my first connection with South African wines. And then, but the one I fell in love with was the African chef. Yeah.
It's a brilliant story, and in many ways it mirrors what you guys do. You pair food and wine brilliantly, just as the two of you seem to pair brilliantly. How does that dynamic work, where you're both very specific in your spaces, but they also do overlap from time to time?
When he develops a new dish, it takes about 10 days and before it comes on the menu, because then we go through different components, different facets of the dish, and then also to see which wine would work with it. And then we go taste through, in average, about 5 to 8 bottles of wine. Not 3 whole bottles, but just flavors of 5 to 8 different bottles of wine to see how does it pair. Do we need to change the dish that it fits with a certain scheme in the menu? How does the dynamic work? And that's then kind of how the dish and the pairing gets together.
Is it a vastly different endeavour to what you might have done back in Germany, given we've got so much South African wine here? We don't have 7,000 Rieslings on the wine list. It's a different space. Is it very different or quite similar?
The base is very similar, because it's, plus minus what flavor profiles to expect from what wines, and therefore it doesn't always work out, because then sometimes there's a little bit of heat coming through in the dish, or a bit of cream that then doesn't make my thoughts work. But so generally it's very similar, very similar.
You've got a terrific wine list later on this evening. I'm going to be ploughing through as much of it as humanly possible. As with so many sommeliers, I asked you for one wine, and you arrived with 17 of them. I think we've pared it down to just a couple. What have you chosen, and how does what you've chosen speak to who you are as a sommelier?
So I think it's always very difficult if you get asked for, choose one wine, because it always also depends on the mood, it depends on the occasion. And I wasn't sure what my mood is going to be today, so I just thought I just cover myself. I always love bubbles, and although South African Cup Classiques are not champagne, but I think there's such a beautiful diversity and so many beautiful smaller producers to discover. So Ambelui is one of them. We're starting off with the Nicolas, so 2 years on the lease, beautiful creaminess, and she's based in Holt Bay. Just make 6,000 bottles of a year's production, but it's still so light, it's creamy, it's rich, but it's fresh, and it's just a perfect bubble to start off with, in my opinion.
It's got an explosive nose. Mm.
It's juicy and it's rich, but it's light, the freshness, the perfect bubbles.
And it's also exactly the kind of Cup Classique that you can see straight away. It's got that breadth to it that if you pair it with some food of substance, you can have a lot of fun.
Exactly, and especially at the moment we're pairing it with our dessert, because generally I like to ease the menu off on a light and refreshing note and not just on a sweet.
All right, so at about 3 o'clock tomorrow morning in the swimming pool, I'll be drinking some more of this. It's one of the things that I think a lot of our sommeliers like yourself have been playing such an important role in South Africa over even the last 5 years, getting more wine drinkers to understand how good our Cup Classique is, how good it can be with food, how much more there is to it than simply, well, let's have a quick toast before opening the regular wine.
Yeah, and I think because, for example, in France, drinking champagne, but also here in South Africa, drinking champagne is such a big prestige thing to do. And of course, if you open a bottle of champagne, it is different to Cup Classique, but that's what it is with all wines. But I think there's so much beauty around us, especially in South Africa, on a wine scheme. So many different styles of wine and so many different varieties, and you get such a broad wine spectrum that actually still needs to be discovered. And I think more and more people are getting into it.
This is one wine of the wines we restricted you to. What else did you decide we absolutely had to try?
So next one, Alex McFarlane. She makes this gorgeous wines. This one now is called the Catalan Wolf. It's a blend of Semillon and Chenin Blanc, about 70% Semillon. Oh, sorry, this was a bit unfair here. And 30 Chenin Blanc. The Semillon she sources from Franschhoek, Chenin Blanc from Stellenbosch, and then on the big barrel. And it's beautiful. It's creamy, but it's rich. There's this beautiful fruitiness coming through. And especially 23 is a very special vintage for us because she's bottling magnums for Summer Hell and the living room. So they're arriving next week. So perfect on timing for this gorgeous meeting.
I shall extend my stay. I think it's cool. She's very much a new name on the scene. I think I first discovered her through her rosé, where again the Semillon shines through. She has a lot of fun with poetry as well. Her Monday's Child and Tuesday's Child, but also she's making some really, really good wine. And I sense that that's probably one of the things you love most about this particular industry, is that you are so consistently discovering new names, new people, new wines. Even as a sommelier who's been doing the job for a while now, there's still a capacity for wine to surprise and to delight and to enchant.
Yeah, absolutely. And also different styles of wine, different playing around with wine. So especially more and more winemakers are just also becoming much more experimental with wine, but still without losing the focus, what makes it really a lot of fun.
Two terrific wines, and both drinking delightfully, and only going to get better as some food unfolds with them a little later on. I throw one last very difficult question at you, not because the question itself is a difficult one, but because deciding what to answer with is the wine journey that you've had so far, and one that's still unfolding day by day. Is there a particular wine that you look back on and you go, you know what, this was the wine that made me realize that this is what I want to do?
Yeah, so when I was working in Berlin, for the restaurant that we were working with had special winemakers edition. And they had this one wine that was paired with Domaine de l'Oresson from the Côte de Roussillon. And it was 100% Carignan, and it was so beautiful. It was light, it was a bit gamey, but it was fruity. It was rich, but it was light, and it was so gorgeously paired. I forgot the dish, but the wine was so beautiful. And it is also where I'm like, yep, I'm right in the perfect space. And that's what also I would love to do winemakers editions, just to get this beautiful, gorgeous, unique vintages, unique wines out. Yeah.
What I loved most about that was for just a brief moment you were gone. You'd left KwaZulu-Natal, you were back in Berlin, that glass of wine had transported you. And that's what wine does. It can take us back in time simply because of a vintage, but also some of my fondest wine memories are because of the situation, the people around it, the place, and wine can do that. It can transport us like few other things can.
Yeah. Like music and food, hey?
Thank you so much, not just for some lovely wine, but for sharing the story. And congratulations, you guys have created something magical here. I'm so excited to be finally making my debut, and I apologise that it's taken so long. The downside is you're probably not going to get rid of me for weeks, especially as your new magnums are arriving. But thank you, and look forward to many more great classes together.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
So there we go. 2022 Restaurant of the Year. It has caused waves of the very best sort across South Africa. Yes, the food is sensational, but the magic ingredient is an Austrian-born German-trained sommelier who loves South African wine almost as much as she loves South African chefs. Now, just after we did that interview, we had a terrific meal with Johanna and Joe, putting together just a real showcase of why they are such a dynamic team. And you can see just from that conversation how much the art of wine and its application to food means to a very welcome new South African who's left Germany behind, I think very happily so. They found a great spot in Durban. If you haven't been to Summerhill Estate, you do need to try it out. The living room is superb, and there will be some more coming from that because he also had a fabulous dinner at the restaurant, and that's coming up in the next couple of weeks on the show. It's not the only great meal I've had of late. I get to have quite a few great meals. I've recently been back to Heirloom with Gregory Sarnecki. We've got him coming on the show soon, the Frenchman who spent a season on MasterChef South Africa, who's now behind the restaurant at the Cape Grace that's doing wonderful things. Also went to Ryan Cole's brand new restaurant, a Koi, sitting at the waterfront, a 7-course dazzle fest. It was just so good. The food was terrific, wonderful view, and to have Koi and Heirloom next to each other, real fine dining territory. And opening soon is Marble in Cape Town with David Higgs. So the waterfront is a fine dining destination, very much moving into the horizon of gourmands across Cape Town and beyond. Of course, there's still plenty of great food just outside of Cape Town. The Winelands are one of the great scenes of great eating across South Africa. Tokara is one of those, but it wasn't Tokara where we ate, it was instead Marble over Tokara wines, because Tokara has got a brand new cabernet sauvignon. Stuart Botha, the winemaker, is really excited by it. Am I excited by it? Well, let's see what that wine is like over lunch in a conversation with the man behind Tokara. Marble is no unusual space for Dan Really Likes Wine to find itself as a show, and over the years when we have been here, it has quite frequently been to catch up with one of the more decorated and exciting young winemakers of Stellenbosch. But we're not just catching up with Stuart from Tokara to drink some great wine and have a great meal at his expense. We're also doing some celebration, which is why we have the bubbles, because congratulations, 25 years of Tokara.
Yeah, cheers, Dan. It's wonderful to be here with you. Thank you for having us, and thank you for joining. I mean, beautiful city today, showing off, and we're looking forward to showing you some interesting new wines and discussing a little bit about the last 25 years.
Now, when G&T Ferreira started Tokara 25 years ago, so you would have been about 3.
Correct.
And so your journey is a more recent one with Tokara. Before you actually got to Tokara, you'd started making wine, you'd got into the broader business. When did Tokara first come across your horizon?
Well, I'll tell you, back in the day when I was studying, Tokara were doing tastings for students, and they were free. And I will never forget that it was always that place that we admired on top of the hill, beautiful scenery, beautiful sights, wonderful wines, and most importantly, free wine tastings. As students, that really did draw a crowd, I can tell you that much. So those were some of my first and fondest memories of Tokara from the very beginning. And I've always looked up to Tokara as one of those estates that was, for me, neatly settled comfortably within the jewel, or a jewel in the crown of the Cape Winelands. And it's always a place that I've aspired to become involved with, and happily my career path brought me there.
So I can't identify the student part because I was at UCT where we were very focused, and I did a Bachelor of Arts degree in English, which meant it was many, many, many hours in lectures.
Behind the books, yeah, I'm sure, with your nose in a book.
No work for 4 years and lots of free wine tastings. And Tokara, I think I actually encountered in a similar manner as well, going back. You knew it, everybody knew it. It was somewhere that for any young winemaker would have been a great one to get to.
Absolutely.
Do you remember when the possibility of perhaps going to Tokara first came across your desk and you had to start considering this as maybe the next chapter?
Yeah, well, obviously, the industry is relatively small, and word got out that my predecessor, Miles Mossop, was making a move to carry on with his own wines, which he's done successfully. And I think then it became something of a scramble to get your hat in the ring. I obviously did exactly that, got my hat in the ring. I knew Carl from working with him before. He's the general manager at Tokara. I was his assistant winemaker in 2007, which was some years before I joined Tokara. But there was a small relationship there, so he had worked with me in the past, and perhaps that stood me in good stead. And yeah, the rest, of course, is history. I joined Tokara in 2017. I've actually just passed my eight-year anniversary at Tokara, so it's safe to say that I'm part of the furniture now.
I think that's more important than 25 years of Tokara, really. We've got 8 years of Stuart. That's a milestone to raise a glass.
No, it's a small one, but of course the focus is always Tokara. The focus is always the longevity and the success of the brand. I'm just a cog in a bigger machine. But thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Immediately the thought is, well, gee, the chance to go to Tokara, that's signing for Manchester United, or maybe not Manchester United currently, but Manchester United a few years ago. That's getting to play for the Springboks. That's big time in the wine industry.
Yeah.
But the flip side to that is, one, you're replacing one of the modern greats of winemaking in Miles Mossop, and two, this is Tokara. You can't just rock up and make some average wine. You've got to do something special. What was the balance there as you started between excitement on one hand, this is a dream job, and then on the other, I'm replacing somebody exceptional, and this is a brand that expects excellence?
Yeah, well, I went in with eyes wide open, for sure. Absolutely understanding that the quality of the brand, the positioning it had in the South African wine industry as a whole is very important. Backed myself, of course. I have a fantastic team. I've got fantastic support from the Ferreira family. And, you know, I look at winemaking like I think jockeys look at horse racing. It's all about the horse, really. And in this case, the terroir with the wine. And not to say that it's easy to make great wines at Tokara, but we certainly have some of the finest terroir in the country. And as a result, if you fastidious about what you do, if you take care as a winemaker, you understand the product, you understand the stylistic goals, which was very well sort of introduced to me as I made the transition into the company. The rest was quite, straightforward. And of course, we've had some great success with the brand. We've had some great success with the wines. The team's grown from strength to strength. I think everybody's very happy with the outcome. I think very, very happy with the wines that we've been producing for the last few years. And, we've now actually got to a point where we can start playing around with smaller parcels, getting to know the terroir and some of the finer intricacies of what the property has to offer, and the ability that we have to create new, novel and special things.
Which leads us rather nicely into the bottle we have in front of here. I'm going to swap my very nice bubbles for a glass of wine I have not tried yet. You've had a lot of success of late with some really good white wine, but the red wine area you find yourself in, you drive up the road and you head past Neil Ellis. As you get to you on the left, on the right, you've got Delair Graf and Mornay's collection. You go just past you guys, you've got Thelema and the work that's being done there. Go over the hill and you're heading down into Oldenburg and into Bartney. And
correct.
You're in a place where basically it looks really easy to make incredibly good wine because everybody's full of it. That, of course, is not the case, because you've got to make an exceptional effort to deliver on the potential of that terroir. But it is, of all of the areas of South Africa, it just does seem to be such a concentrated and focused space for the potential to generate exceptional world-class red wine.
Yeah, that is without a doubt. And it's actually the Simonsberg region as a whole, that mountain range really, I think, would form the cornerstone to all of those estates that you've just mentioned. And the attributes that it imparts on the wines that are produced, or the grapes and wines that are produced from the vineyards on its slopes, are really, really unique and starting to show themselves to be something quite special. It also helps, of course, that we've got some famous names and estates working with those terroirs towards what can and is starting to be formulated as somewhat of a common goal, focusing on varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon, which do exceptionally well in those terroirs. And of course, Tokara playing their part, and no different with our recent release of our Simonsberg Cab, aptly named.
All right, so Cabernet Sauvignon from the Simonsberg, which is what I've deciphered from the name Simonsberg Cabernet Sauvignon. It is a wine I'm very excited about because Tokara Cab, or blends that have been led by Tokara Cab, are featured pretty heavily in my cellar. They're never there for very long, largely because my wife is a kleptomaniac when it comes to wine. You're producing something here which, again, you're drawing from, I'd imagine, a very special parcel. You're drawing from grapes that you feel have done something exceptional. You've put what, by South African terms, is a reasonably big price tag on this.
Yeah.
Having spent some time in America not long ago, what you charge for this bottle is half a glass of slightly warm box wine from a wine bar somewhere in Manhattan. So global standards, it's still not expensive at all, but it's very much in the premium category. How are you selling this to me, to the public, as saying this is something that special?
Well, you've got to look at the Tokara Cab story as a whole to understand what we've done with the Cabernet, the Simonsberg Cabernet. And realizing that we've now reached just a milestone of 25 years in the industry as a producer, we understand that contextually and in context, that's a relatively small time in the South African wine industry, or in any wine industry per se. But it's also a long time to be in business producing the same styles of wine. And what that affords us is the acknowledgement and the knowledge and the know-how of what to do with this particular variety. We've got a number of Cabernet Sauvignons in our range, this being one of the finer examples. But like you said, it's really drilling down into our understanding, our experience of the variety on our slopes, understanding the different sites, clonal material, and how they interact. And then, of course, the maturation and the making of the wine, which is something that we've kept incredible records of over the 25 years that we've been making these wines. And it's allowed us to actually start to really go into the fine detail about this variety and produce something that we believe is completely exceptional and even remarkable from our side.
All right, well, let's see if this is the real winemaker speaking or just Carl channeling some marketing speak. I think I know which it is going to be. While we happily drink this, and happy is definitely the right term, give us a quick synopsis for those people sitting at home already salivating as we gather through this. What, as a winemaker, is very specifically giving this Cabernet Sauvignon the credentials you've spoken of?
So what we did when we made the combination of this wine, it's from 3 different parcels on the property, which distinguish themselves for having quite a high percentage of decomposed granite gravels in the soil profile. And that what that gives you is an incredibly plush, but at the same time very rich tannin profile. So it's quite moorish, you will taste on the palate, even now in its youth. And then it also gives you a profile of more blue spectrum, dark cassis character on the nose, which is very, very typical for the variety, especially in what one could consider the New World. And we certainly in South Africa can be considered a New World producer. So we've really just pinpointed those 2 characteristics, that fine, dense grain tannin, and then those beautiful blue and cassis spectrum aromatics on the nose. And then, of course, when it all came together, these wines and the barrels that were chosen for this wine stuck their hands up, completely and utterly, just a little bit more than what else we had in the cellar. And it's always tempting as a winemaker to take those small little parcels and put them together in one bottle and have it as an offering. And that's exactly what we've done. It's really a tribute to the place that we come from. It's a tribute to the time that we've spent with the variety. It's a tribute to all that's gone before it at Tokara in terms of creating a great fine wine from a South African stable. And it's something that we believe we can continue to do into the future, and will have wonderful success with.
It is exceptional. It's still early on in its lifespan. So I think it's going to unfold. Well, it's still got that wound up tightness that I actually quite enjoy as a hallmark of great younger Cabernet Sauvignon. You can very much drink it now, but I think it's just going to unfurl a little and put its feet up and kick its shoes off in the not too distant future.
Without a doubt, this will keep giving and giving for at least 15 years to 20 years.
Right, well, what I shall do then is for the Tokara 40th anniversary, I shall pencil into my diary as we sit down with a bottle of the maiden vintage.
Absolutely.
And I think it'll still be going strong with no horizon in sight at that point. And that gives us a reason to celebrate both the launch of a brand new wine, and it is the triumph that one would have expected, but also 25 years. And I think with our great South African wine names, it's more than just about the names themselves. It's what they do for the greater South African wine environment, and Tokara's had a really big role to play over 25 years and counting. So please pass on congratulations to Mr. Ferreira. I know your towering manservant, Mr. Lambour, is wandering around somewhere as well. He's had a role to play as well. But to the whole Tokara family, you've given us much pleasure. You're continuing to do so with this. I know there are many more to come. But for now, congratulations and well done on another great edition.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So there we go. 25 years of Tokara. This is the latest. It's not going to be the most inexpensive bottle of wine you ever buy, but it's definitely one investing in. Hang on to it, give it some time, and get another reminder of both why Stuart is a rather good winemaker and why Tokara continues to give us some of South Africa's finest wine. Cheers. It's always a terrific meal at Marble when it is supplemented by the wines of Tokara, or the more so. That new Cabernet Sauvignon, it's got a price to it, but place it in global context, it's still not anywhere near what you might pay for a wine of a similar quality in some of the international markets. Doesn't necessarily make it easier for us back at home, but it is one to aspire to and to try and add a few bottles to the cellar of, because not only is it great now, but it is going to unfold and age quite delightfully, as so many of Tokara's wines have done over the years. And they're celebrating that special anniversary as well. So congratulations to Stuart and to G&T Ferreira and to Carl Lambour and to the rest of the team. You've got a wonderful, wonderful space, and it's always great to share some time with you, which I got to do with the Richter team as well today down in KwaZulu-Natal. So thank you to Living Room, and a big thank you to Joanne from Pillar 9 for putting all of that together. And that wraps me up, because I've got a golf course to go and take apart, go and shoot well, we won't work out what I'll shoot, but it will be lots of fun, because golf in South Africa, well, it's almost as much fun as drinking wine in South Africa. Enjoy your week. I'll be checking in next week from Scotland. Have a lovely weekend. Happy drinking. Goodbye.